Welcome back to War Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Anthony coming to you. It looks like your office in Valley Sports North. So the Twins must have a game today, Anthony. I'm down in South Florida for game 4 of the Eastern Conference Final. Head to New York again tomorrow and probably back here and probably back to New York. And found out today that I'm definitely covering. I thought originally I was covering the Stanley Cup Finals just if there are certain matchups, but now I'm covering no matter what. So, I'm looking forward to at some point getting back to Minnesota to see you, Anthony.
Well, that's good. It'll keep you busy for a while. That's good.
Honestly, at this rate, the next time I might see you is at our next live show, which we are here to announce is June 24th, 7 p.m. at Tuttle's. So June 24th, 7 p.m. at Tuttle's. Haven't had a live show since April or March. So looking forward to that. Anthony, before we get to the NHL and the Stanley Cup playoffs and the Minnesota Wild, and by the way, Ryan Carter, you're one of your partners in crime over there at Valley Sports North, will be joining us during the second block to talk about the Wild and talk about everything that he's doing in the offseason. But I wanted to talk to you about PWHL Minnesota's game 4 the other night, Anthony. Have you ever seen anything like it where they score the winning goal and they celebrate understandably going crazy on the ice, and then it turns out that they are reviewing the fact that they felt that Taylor Heiss might have interfered with the goalie, and after a long review, they decided that she did interfere with the goalie. They wiped out the winning goal and the championship clinching goal, and then they have to go and regather their equipment all over the ice, finally get that together, drop the puck, and lose like a second later to force a game 5.
I've seen it happen in overtime situations and at the high school level in college hockey. I don't know that I've ever seen it in a series clinching game in pro hockey before. I've certainly seen teams think they had overtime winners and celebrate and then have to come back out and resume. There was one bizarre one, I think it was 2 years ago, where it was in the WCHA final game.
Yeah.
And the teams had actually gone to their locker rooms
down in Mankato.
And started to get undressed and everything and had to be dragged back out to resume play. It was a crazy finish. It was great to see the crowd get behind the Minnesota club. I know that their attendance numbers had been down a little bit late in the year, and the break in the middle of the season probably didn't help. It was great to see for that game 4, XL Energy Center nearly full. And I think they got the call right. It was unfortunate for Minnesota fans. I do think they got the call right. That's the most important thing. And now you got to go to Boston and win game 5, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that needs to happen. It would be a real shame if they don't win the championship now. Obviously, Taylor Heiss just, I'm sure she felt she was aided, but she lost her edge and crashed into the goalie. And the reality is that the penalty wasn't called for tripping. So if that penalty is not called on review, well, there was goalie interference. And so you could debate the penalty or not the penalty, but the reality is that she definitely interfered with the goaltender's ability to make the save. So unfortunate circumstance. I've never seen anything like it. Congratulations are in order to David Spacek, the Wild's draft pick. Yaroslav Spacek's son with Czechia. Wins the gold medal at the World Championships. And man, Anthony, what celebrations over there in Prague the last couple of days. Pasternak on stage dancing with his baby and his wife, and crowds going crazy on the subway system. And it was pretty cool to see. And you and I were in Prague. That was last summer, right? And we know how much they...
A couple summers
ago. And we know how much they love their hockey there. And it was pretty neat to see Spacek get to celebrate.
Yeah, and I think they surprised a lot of people when they had beaten Team USA in the quarterfinals. I think a lot of people would have assumed at that point that was a collapse or a disappointment for Team USA, but that was a good roster for Team Czechia. And I know we talked about Billy Guerin's statements that he has made and trying to get more players to dive in for the United States. When you looked at some of those rosters that the other countries had, there weren't very many guys missing if they weren't still playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it wasn't a fluke that the Czechs advanced. They pounded Sweden in the semifinals, And I watched a little bit of that game. I watched some of the Canada-Switzerland semifinal game. That wasn't a fluke either. The Swiss beat them in their semifinal. There were some quality hockey teams in that tournament, and there's a little home ice advantage, I guess, for Team Czechia.
I'm sure Bill Guerin, I did a story the other day, and he was pretty diplomatic, but I'm sure he wasn't happy with some of the guys that did not come over for the United States, and I think that will be held against them. There were only a couple bubble players. Those guys did perform well in Matt Boldy and Johnny Gaudreau and players like that, but a lot of guys that were bubble players, Thompson, I mean, some of them had injuries and other reasons. Zegras was there, Troy Terry was there, but where was Clayton Keller? Maybe because he's moving to a different NHL team, he couldn't come. Tage Thompson, obviously, I think he did have an injury talk. A lot of guys didn't show up. So we'll see what that means. The only thing I don't love about the World Championship, Anthony, is that you essentially get ringers in the middle of the tournament. Like all of a sudden, surprise, David Pastrnak lost to the Florida Panthers in the second round. And next thing you know, is on the flight the next day to join his team. But we've seen that throughout the history of hockey.
Yeah, and I thought about that a little bit I said, well, and I was thinking, I was actually having a conversation with Vinny about it, and he was asking, because he's never really paid any attention to the World Championships, and he said, well, why don't they just play it later? And I said, look, then you'd have a situation where guys who didn't make the playoffs wouldn't have been playing hockey for 6 or 8 weeks, and all of a sudden show up for this tournament. The beauty of the tournament and the timing of it is that everybody that's playing in it is essentially uninterrupted from their season, either guys who didn't make the playoffs that are there from the beginning, or as each round of the Stanley Cup playoffs end and you get a little injection. It is awkward, but it's not, it really is similar to the world of minor league baseball, where all of a sudden the playoffs start in Class AAA and this team's AA team didn't make it, so they call up a couple of their superstar prospects and join the roster. It's just a part of the tournament. It's what it's always been, and I think it's cool when those guys go back and play for their countries and celebrate like that and take some pride in it, even though it's not a full best on best roster, but it still matters to those guys, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. And to, the one thing that you could tell Vinny too, is this isn't an NHL tournament. So, I mean, they don't work around the NHL schedule. And as we see, every time it's overseas, how much those nations take it seriously. We've seen before where Finland won in their host country, Sweden as well. And it's a huge deal over there. So congratulations to Spacek. Congratulations to Sweden for meddling and all the Wild players that were on Team Sweden. Seemed like a lot of them really performed well. And a lot of Wild players perform well over there as well. Let's talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs, Anthony. Let's talk about the series on that. Florida Rangers. I don't know if you watched that game the other night, man. I don't know if I've ever covered, it's common cliche in hockey to say, if we play 82 games like that, we're going to win our share of games. But in a 7-game series, when you play that style and dominate a game to the degree that the Florida Panthers dominated the New York Rangers the other night and lose that game, it's got to have potential lasting effects. And so I'll be really interested to see how they play tonight in Game 4. There's a lot of heart on this team, and I don't think that they're just going to sit there and be so dejected that they just wind up losing just because they don't show up. But, man, that had to be just an awful, awful feeling for them the other night to not get that done in the third period. What it did is it allowed the Rangers to reset, Anthony. And then, once you reset, you can get a crummy goal like that eventually beats you. And that's exactly what happened to Sergei Bobrovsky and the Panthers.
Well, it's true. And I think it's not that far off from what we talked about last week when we were previewing the series. And I had said I thought Florida was going to have like a 60-40, 65-35 edge in possession chances in order to win this series. And yes, you're right. You always talk about that if you play the game that way every night. But the difference in a playoff series is you're facing the same goalie every night.
Yep.
So over the course of a season, you say, okay, tonight this guy robbed us, but tomorrow night we're going to Columbus. And then the next night we're going to Detroit. And the next night we're going to Chicago. Well, here you got Igor Shesterkin again in the other net very next game. So, and goaltending is a big part of hockey. So that's why I picked the Rangers to win that series. Was I said, I'll take Shesterkin over Bobrovsky every day of the week. And And when you put yourself in that spot and you can't get the separator goal, now you are one bad bounce away. And I don't want to totally display the skill level on the winning goal as a lucky bounce, but you put yourself in a spot where one bad bounce can swing a game. And I think for all the possession that Florida had, I thought the Rangers did a good job of just sticking with it, not panicking. And Florida was the better team and the Rangers won the game, but that's a part of hockey.
Shot possession 108-44 in that game. It was crazy to watch, especially in the third period, where yet again, for the umpteenth time in the series, the Rangers would go 10, 12, 14 minutes without a shot, without touching the puck. And yet they somehow got to Bobrovsky. Other than the last goal, I didn't think Bobrovsky performed well. And I actually think, for the most part, he's been performing on par or better than Shesterkin in this series. But the other night, obviously, two incredible Alexei Lafreniere goals. And Barclay Goodrow gets a couple. They're shorthanded. I joked on last week's show that the Panthers should probably not even draw penalties. We saw that come to fruition the other day with a shorthanded goal by Barclay Goodrow. And it's really amazing. Like, Wenberg he had one goal in something like 19 games in the regular season for the Rangers, no goals in 12 playoff games. Barclay Goodrow had 4 goals in 80 regular season games. He now has 6 in the playoffs. So guys are coming through for the Rangers in a series where so far Zibanejad, Panarin, and Kreider have not contributed on the score sheet. Anthony, what do you think of the Jacob Trouba chicken wing the other day? Because that obviously drew the ire of the Panthers. That originally was a no call. Then they called it a major to review it and then decided to downgrade it to a minor.
Yeah, I didn't think it was worthy of like 5 in a game or anything, but that's the kind of player Trouba has been. He takes way too many penalties, and he's been a good leader for the Rangers. He seems to be a little bit of a heart and soul guy with that club. You probably have a better handle on that, being around this team a lot. Yep. But from the outside, that's certainly what he appears to be. I've thought, watching him all season, that he just takes too many penalties. And even in the playoffs, when I know that we've talked to the officials and they always point to the numbers and say, everybody talks about, you put the whistles away in the playoffs, the penalty numbers are actually just as high in the playoffs. I think throughout this postseason, they've really allowed a lot more to go than in previous years. And yet, even with that, Trouba still seems to find himself marching to the penalty box a couple times a night. And I don't think you can continue to do that and win this series.
Yeah, he took 3 minors the other night, including one in the final. Late in the third period, that was another just helter-skelter power play where the Panthers had a ton of chances. It really is interesting watching this Florida team. They have so much skill, Anthony, and they're so deep, and yet they wind up so far down 2-1 in the series. Let's turn our attention to the Western Conference, Anthony. Dallas last night roars back on the Edmonton Oilers. And Jason Robertson finally broke out. It's been a really quiet playoff for him, but one big reason was Roope Hintz's upper body injury. And Roope Hintz comes back into the lineup, and what do you know? A hat trick for J-Rob.
And he was good, I thought, last night. And a little bit of similarity where Edmonton was probably the better team for larger chunks of that game. But I think you got to give Dallas a lot of credit. I think the way that Edmonton jumps them, they're up 2-0. And in Dallas, you never sensed that they got away from their game in any way. Never sensed a team that panicked in any way. And it was almost like, and I don't know that this is what Pete DeBoer is saying, but it's almost like, hey, guys, stay the course. It's Edmonton. They will do something stupid and give us a chance to create opportunities. And they will still be Edmonton. They always have been. They always will be. And sure enough, Edmonton breaks down a couple times defensively, and Dallas takes advantage. I think there's 2 things that, again, I'll go back to the fact that when we previewed this series last week, we both picked Dallas to win this series. And for me, it was for 3 reasons. One is goaltending. I'll take Jake Ottinger over Stuart Skinner every day of the week. And Ottinger hasn't been rattled. It's almost like he went into the series knowing this isn't going to be a series of a bunch of shutouts. You're going to have to win some games 4-3, 5-3. And as a goaltender, if you give up a couple, you can't give up the next one. And Ottinger's been able to do that. Second thing is that I think Dallas's depth is a huge advantage. And as you just mentioned, Robertson hadn't done much, and yet you wouldn't even notice. We talked about it last week. Pavelski scores his first goal in the clinching game of round two, and yet you never noticed because they've got so many other guys that can score. And because of that, yes, Edmonton's big guns have been great in the playoffs, but they don't have scoring coming from their lower lines like Dallas does. And then the third thing is, I think, just Dallas's discipline and commitment to their plan. I think you got to give Pete DeBoer a lot of credit for that. They came into this knowing that if you sustain a forecheck, if you make Edmonton work in their own zone, they inevitably break down more frequently than most teams in the league. And as good as Edmonton has been defensively since they made the coaching change, which it's been different, you got to give them credit. They're still Edmonton at heart, and it's still all about offense. It's still guys going 100 miles an hour one way and 62 miles an hour coming back, and that will cost them if you stay the course. And Dallas has done that really well.
And speaking of defense, how about Miro Heiskanen, all playoff
terrific.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to give them credit, too, because they went out and added Tanev on their blue line to what appeared to be on paper already a strength of their club. He's been a big addition for them.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the Mason Marchment embellishment last night. I know that you put out the sarcastic thing, what a Dallas player diving. Yeah. I actually thought that wasn't a dive. I thought he was cross-checked under the numbers. But here's the deal. Mason Marchment might be the biggest diver in the league, and he's awful at it, by the way. I've said this on the last couple podcasts, that he might be the worst diver I think I've ever seen. He had a couple in that Wild series last year that were unbelievable. And Steve Kozari, who made the call, has been the ref in a lot of those games. In fact, one last year where he dove in the Wild series, Steve Kozari was the ref. And I have contended a lot of times, like a lot of people are like, if you want to curb diving in the NHL, Anthony, just call one. Call the diver, don't call the aggressor. Right. Here's my thing that I think you need to do. I think every single morning, all throughout the year, that the referees wake up, they get video every day from games that they've done, games that other people done. I think the league actually should send them video of people that essentially have a reputation of embellishing. Show them. Because what this comes down to the heart of is you're embarrassing the official. You're insulting their intelligence. And I think that if you're going to dive, the referees should know who the big guys that in the league that dive, and that when they suddenly draw penalties, they don't get the benefit of the doubt. If that happens, diving will stop in its tracks. And I think that was a reputation call the other day. I think that Steve Kozari is well aware that Mason Marchment dives all over the ice and just wasn't buying it, whether it was true or not. And I think that's a referee that also says, you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And here, boom, you're going to the box, whether it's fair or not. And I'm all for that. I think that's the right move on these guys.
I agree with a lot of what you just said, other than that I did think he embellished last night. There was a cross-check, but it wasn't – I didn't think it was an egregious cross-check. I thought it was – we've seen a lot worse cross-checks go uncalled completely. Yeah. And what I have always argued is call it one time. I mean, there are times where it can be a cross-check and an embellishment, and I think last night might be that. It was a cross-check and he embellished. But there are a lot of times where it doesn't have to be both. It can just be the dive. And I think I only can remember one or two times where I've seen an official just call embellishment and not call the other. Because to me, that's not even a little bit of a factor that would dissuade you from diving. What's the worst thing that happens is you end up 4-on-4. And instead, if you just said, look, yeah, maybe the guy got you a little bit in the ribs, but I would have never called that a cross-check. The fact that you took a dive is an embellishment call, and I'm taking just you. We hear refs say it all the time in those scrums around the net. Hey, I'm only taking one, meaning I'm not just going to let you guys punch each other in the face and then just take both of you. And you say that, well, it's worth it to take the risk because worst cases I end up 4-on-4. I think this is the same thing. Just take one. Take only the diver and not the other guy. And there can be both. There are plays where it can be both. But I also think there are a lot of plays where it doesn't have to be that way. And my fear is it's going to turn into what you've seen with the NBA, where it's guys are flopping constantly trying to get calls. And I think it has destroyed their game.
Yeah. In 1998, I still remember being in Greensboro Coliseum where the Panthers are playing the Hurricanes before they moved to Raleigh. And Dino Ciccarelli, the referee, I can't even believe the referee was a guy named Richard Trottier. And he called Dino for a cross check and somebody else for embellishment. And Dino went on a rant that night in that visiting locker room on this exact subject that you're saying. He's like, how can there be both? Like it just went on a rant. And here we are 26 years later, still having the same debate. But I think, like, to me, the other night was actually, whether he dove or not, I think that was a good start. Like, Steve Gazzari knows that Mason Marchment dives and was not giving him the benefit of the doubt. And boom, you're going to the box. We're evening it up.
Well,
I love
you
it.
see it on the other side. Think of how many times we saw it this year where we wondered about Ryan Hartman being on the wrong end of calls. He had earned a reputation of being a guy on the edge, and therefore he paid the price. And we both talked about that over the course of the season, that I think you earn that reputation and then you have to suffer the consequences. And this is a case where, whether Marchment legitimately embellished or not, I agree with you. He's done it enough times where, all right, maybe this one wasn't as big a dive as he's had in the past, but you've had plenty that you got away with. So now this one, we caught you.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go to somebody that would never, ever dive, and that is Ryan Carter on the other side of this break. But first, here's a word from some of our sponsors.
Hey there, it's Russo representing my friends at Aquarius Home Services. With summer closing in, the last thing I want is to be left in the heat. That's why I reached out to Aquarius Home Services. In no time, they dispatched a skilled technician to perform my AC tune-up, just what I needed. Professional, knowledgeable, and efficient, the technician prepped my furnace for the upcoming summer heat. One thing I could tell you is Aquarius delivers a 5-star furnace tune-up experience, a comprehensive evaluation of your entire heating system, results shared, and any questions answered with a smile. And here's the best part. Right now, you could save 50% off on this essential service. Aquarius ensures transparency with upfront pricing and even offers their no breakdown guarantee. Don't gamble with the summer heat waves. Get your AC in top shape with Aquarius Home Services today. Aquarius believes in earning the right to be recommended. They're just a click away at aquariushomeservices.com.
Don't wait. Save smarter with a 5.10% annual percentage yield 13-month certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 5.10% 13-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return on your investment. Open a 5.10% 13-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate 510. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 3/1/24. Insured by NCUA.
Hey, this is Russo for Livia Weight Control Centers. Now is the time to get a jump on summer the Livia way. Join Livia today and get your first 8 weeks free. In those first 8 weeks, by following Livia's nutrition plan and with the help of their expert team of registered dietitians and nutritionists, you can lose up to 20 pounds or more. Imagine how much better you'll feel, not to mention how much better your summer clothes will fit. Join Livia today and you'll also receive a complimentary in-body scan. Take it from me, I joined at Christmas and I've lost more than 40 pounds. I've been on the road for 2 weeks covering the playoffs. I have 6 more weeks on the road and things are going perfectly. I travel with my food, I do weekly check-ins with their dietitians, and anytime I need anything, I just know that they're a phone call away. I'm well on my way to my weight loss goal. So join Livia today and get your first 8 weeks of Livia's nutrition plan free. Visit Livia.com, that's Livea.com, or call 855-GO-LIVIA. Make sure to let them know that Russo sent you and they'll get you all set up. Plus, Livia's medical weight loss is now offering GLP-1 medication starting at just $299 per month. Quiet the food noise and see accelerated results by summer. Visit Livia.com or call 855-GO-LIVIA. Get a jump on summer the Livia way.
All right, back here, worst seats in the house. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, Ryan Carter joining us with his sunglasses on in his car. Usually when you're in your car, Ryan, you've run out of gas and are just waiting for AAA to bring you some gas or something. But no, are you fully filled?
Well, I went with the hybrid so that when I run out of gas, I might have a little electrical power to get me where I need to be in this vehicle. But that happened once, Michael, once. Okay. But no, I'm actually sitting in the car in the driveway because the kids get out of school at 2:15 and they have a complete lack of respect for any type of silence after school. So this is the only place I could get away.
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
you
I'll
have
tell
a
you one
car-
thing.
you get a car
Just real quick,
powered
you
by
look
bees.
very. Yeah, just real quick, Ryan. You look very relaxed, like somebody that hasn't seen Anthony in a month and a half.
Well, I did see him. It was on a golf course, and Anthony cost me a little money. I'll let him tell you the story.
Wow.
He decided to birdie a par 5 that he had no business birdieing to win a hole that I would have had. But Anthony, the time on the golf course, or at least the range that he spends, paid dividends in terms of bragging rights and money taken from my pocket.
Well, that's true, but in the more important match that day, you and I were partners and came out on top and earned ourselves a repeat invite to the private course where we were playing.
That's true. That's true. And I will mention that happened to be the only hole that Anthony birdied the entire day. So
Yeah, that's valid.
we were teammates, and we were good teammates until he flexed on me. But
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you know that even the PGA Tour guys, most of those guys only average like 2.7 birdies per round. So I wasn't that far off of where I'm supposed to be.
I like it. Yeah, the golf game's coming into good form for you, so that was fun.
Well, and
We're
I know
talking
you were just prepping for a tournament out there anyway. That the big time guys that have to go out that can't hit, they gotta hit like 3 woods and 5 woods when they only need to go 275.
Yeah.
Ryan, and by the way, Ryan, co-host of Wild on 7th, the best, we'll call it the best Wild podcast out there. We're the second best, Anthony. Ryan, obviously it's been a month and a half. Feels like well more since the Wild last played a game. Disappointing end to their season. Clearly not making the playoffs for only the second time since 2012. When you look back at the season and digest it, look, Bill Guerin at the end of the year didn't use injuries as an excuse, so I don't think that we should either. Where do you think that this season sort of fell off the tracks? Because it really felt like right from the very, very beginning, they just never got any traction. Another slow start to this year, and they just really never really recovered and put themselves in a position where, come December and January when they were starting to play well, that injuries, like if you have a couple injuries then, well, you're the ones that put yourselves in a position to not have any excuses and to maybe fall apart. They never gain themselves any sort of cushion.
Well, where I think that, gosh, and I can see where Bill doesn't want to use injury as an excuse. It's valid, and here's why. For me, going into last season, the number one thing they needed, down $14 million, is the roster looked good. It looked like a playoff roster, but what they needed was for those guys to be able to play. So if you had an injury, all of a sudden you're replacing, an NHL caliber player with somebody that isn't an NHL caliber player. Whereas I think other clubs, and with $14 million more and different situations, maybe injuries shouldn't be an excuse. But I think in the Wild's case, it really got off the rails early on in the year. The number one thing for me was stay healthy. And starting off without Jared Spurgeon, and then it just kind of seemed like it snowballed from there. And I get that
Boldy, it was just over and over again.
And I get that it's not an excuse, and I get where I think management wouldn't want to use that as an excuse, but it's truth and it's reality. They had a good a playoff roster when healthy, and then you saw what an injury or two did. All of a sudden, it didn't look like a playoff roster. So at full strength, I think that it's a playoff club. But with even just one injury, and that's what it is. With it, it's maybe the lack of depth. So perhaps the season went off the rails in the summer when there's just an inability to get enough NHL caliber depth to be able to survive some of these injuries.
Yeah, I think and you and I have talked about this, Ryan, that it isn't an excuse. It's just an explanation. You're not offering an excuse saying that, well, Billy had no control over it. It was just, that makes it sound like it was just bad luck. And he knew that he was going to be hamstrung by the salary cap number that was going to make creating depth more challenging. But I think that's what this year they have a little more flexibility. I just think you also have to learn a lesson from this year. And that is that you absolutely have to be more prepared to deal with injuries with your American Hockey League roster, whether it be with more NHL caliber players there, with a wider array of types of players there, somehow, some way, you have to have yourself in a better position to deal with multiple injuries at the same time.
And I think the other situation that played out is in the Wild were patient with guys like Marco Rossi and some of these younger players, but they in some ways were thrust into roles that they absolutely had to be in. And some of these guys maybe weren't fully ready for them. And maybe Rossi does fit on a playoff team as a third line center, but maybe it's not a playoff team right now if he's your top line center. And that's what happened with some of those injuries. And that's a depth thing. And I think, again, because of the money and the situation that they've had on the blue line, they've had to put guys in situations that they can succeed in, I think, in short periods of time. But over the aggregate, like 82 games, you start to see weakness show up and you start to be able to predict the weakness. And let's be honest, every other scouting staff or coaching staff out there by game 60 knows the strengths and weaknesses of every club, and they can specifically target it. I think you see it in the playoffs right now. A 7-game series is different than a one-off game around game 60, but they still can target your weakness. And if it's there, it's present, and the opposition can count on it, they're going to exploit it. And I think those things popped up this season too.
Right now, obviously, we're in late May. Bill Guerin is back from the World Championships. This week, he's got his amateur scouting staff in Minnesota getting ready for the draft. That's when they're also workshop different potential trades and things that they could do on the draft table. I really genuinely believe that at 13, the Wild, everybody keeps on, are they going to move up? Are they going to move up? Are they going to move up? I think there's a much better chance of them actually moving down, especially when you see teams like Chicago the other day make moves to get a second round pick, move up a couple spots. That's clearly, to me, a sign that a team like the Blackhawks want to move even further up in the draft, and maybe you could move down to 18 or something like that and get a later pick. That's one thing that I think that they are going to consider this week. Then the pro scouts come here, and that's when things really get really interesting, because that's when they're going to start workshopping trades. They're going to start thinking about, a guy like Marco Rossi, and if that's somebody that can maybe be moved. Same thing with Philip Gustafsson as well. Ryan, in terms of the goaltending, it was obviously a disappointment this year in terms of save percentage and expected goals and the way the Wild defended compared to the chances that they were giving up. Right now, it's Gustafsson and Fleury back, but it's very clearly Bill Guerin's desire to get Wallstedt on this team. Would it be shocking to you at all if Gustafsson is back on next year's roster, or do you pretty much think that he's going to be moved here in the next 3 or 4 weeks?
I wouldn't be shocked. Goaltending is a critical position, and I know they're strapped on money and different things, and I don't know how all that's going to work, but I wouldn't be shocked, because I look at goaltenders throughout the NHL, and I know Wallstedt looks like he's probably ready to be at least given a chance at the NHL level. But does that mean a couple games, or does that mean 50 games? Because you look at Marc-Andre Fleury, and he's in great shape, and he can still play, and he's competitive, and you say all those things. But the reality is, like, if you think you're going to win, it's going to be hard for him. You almost, with him, know that you need a tandem, right? You need two guys, and Fleury being back, you've got Gustafsson under contract. Now, the other reason I'd have pause or reservation in getting rid of a goaltender is he's still young, and sometimes you look at goaltenders and the way that they develop. And each one's different, but look at a guy like Devan Dubnyk, who came here to Minnesota, and he was great, first round pick, but he couldn't lay roots anywhere, whether it was Nashville, Edmonton, Arizona, long enough to stay there. But he was an NHL caliber goaltender. Just took a little bit of time for him to be there, right? And I think you look around, there's a lot of goaltenders like that, like Jacob Markstrom. How many people know that he started in Florida, then went to Vancouver, and then he hit pay dirt that final season in Vancouver, and now he's like a marquee goaltender in Calgary. You start to give up on some of these goaltenders a little too early. Everybody says it right out of the gate. You have to be patient with goaltenders. It takes them a little bit longer. Their prime is probably a couple years later than a skating player. So would I be surprised if Gustafsson is on this roster? No, because I don't know that the deal that they would get would be worth the risk of losing a potential number one goaltender. And let's look at Gustafsson in my experience being in a locker room over time and guys that have had to earn their first contract. So earn financial stability. Gustafsson did that with this deal for the first time. And Brian Burke called it fat cat syndrome, where all of a sudden you got your new deal and you're comfortable. Your game slides a little bit, you lose a little bit of an edge, and you don't perform. It's possible that Gustafsson just simply had a case of fat cat syndrome. He was comfortable. He had a kid, a couple other things off the ice. Like, life looks good. But you start to get that competitive nature again after a tough season like that. And a goaltender specifically can really rebound and be good in that situation. So I think there's a lot to weigh there. Would I be surprised? No. Would I be surprised if they trade him? No. But I do think that at some point there will be at least 3 goaltenders that play a game in the Wild sweater next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was actually part of what there were 2 parts to this, in my opinion. One is that with what Wallsted's salary is, it wouldn't be out of the question to carry 3 goaltenders for a couple of different stretches during the season. They'd have some flexibility with that. But then the second thing is, as much as we've talked about Gustafsson and his personality, and he's a different cat and it almost comes across as aloof sometimes. And even with that, there is no doubt that at the end of the season, when he, even as disconnected as he may be, starts to hear all the conversation and the chatter about that Wallsted's ready, Wallsted's the man, Wallsted's the future, it had to stick with him a little bit. And I would imagine we'd see a guy with a little bit different mindset coming throughout the summer and into camp, assuming that he's coming back next fall.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Ryan, 2 of the bright spots last season were, late in the year, we got to see a little bit of the future with Liam Ogren and Murat Huznadinov. It looks like both now have a real good chance to be on next year's roster. They're going to give Riley Heidt every opportunity out of camp to make the team as well and potentially stick around for at least the 9-game experimental period before they have to really decide if they're going to burn a year and send him back to junior or not. How much do you almost need to expect, one, that they're going to be on the team, but because of that, I mean, do you look at next year's roster as one that they are still going to look at as like, this is a guaranteed playoff team? Or do you see a team that is now going to start to make a little bit of a transition where they're willing to just bite the bullet and put kids in positions to play, even if it means some growing pains and things like that?
Well, it seems like they're gonna have to put kids in positions, and where I think that they're gonna need to be careful is that what's best for the player and the organization, or is that simply to check the box of a need in the short term, like in the moment? Mm-hmm. And I think for players it's hard too, because you want to be an NHL player right out of the gate. You want them to say you're good enough, but the reality is you might not be. Look at Marco Rossi, his first year. It was almost an identical scenario where they said, yeah, this is your spot. Come and get it. And he played however many games, it was 20 games and 1 assist. He wasn't scoring. And finally they said, you know what? This isn't fair to the player. This isn't good for the organization. Let's let him go develop at his own pace in the American Hockey League. I think the same should be done with these individuals. If they're ready, absolutely let them play. And at no point should you hinder the kids and say, hey, this is the NHL now, you can't make mistakes. So if all of a sudden the players are looking like they're afraid to make a mistake on the ice, I don't think that they should be playing in the NHL, despite the fact that they might, the Wild might need them to in certain situations. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's what's best for the player. And I'll give Bill Guerin a lot of credit. I do think he is not afraid to do whatever is best for the player. He'll take it on the chin to do what's best for the player, to make everybody in there and put them in the best situation possible. So I do think they'll do that. Now, on paper, do I think it's a playoff team? Again, probably if it can stay healthy, it probably needs a little bit more of a secondary scoring punch. But let's take a quick look at Dallas right now, who's, in the West final, beating up on Edmonton. Who are their go-to guys? Wyatt Johnston, some of these younger players, Logan Stankoven. It's like, you have to give those guys a chance to see what they're made of, because all of a sudden in the playoffs, like they're scoring huge goals for Dallas. And on the flip side of that, who's scoring the timely goals? It's Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. So you need some guys that know what they're doing, and you need some young guys that are even surprising themselves with what they're capable of doing a little bit. I think it's possible that the Wild have some of those assets in Liam Ogren, maybe Height, or Kuznetsov. But maybe if they cast a wide enough net and those kids can compete with each other for some limited minutes, that would be a good thing. But I think it's a playoff team, again, if it stays healthy and if these kids pan out and they don't end up having to shoehorn things down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
I think with everything that we've talked about is I couldn't agree more. I mean, these guys, they haven't proven it yet. They certainly did their part to at least earn themselves a look going into next season. But if you had to guess with the two guys that Michael talked about first, Ogren and Kuznetsov, did you see enough from them late in the season that would lead you to believe that they're guys that not only make the club out of camp, but stick in the NHL from start to finish next year?
Well, I don't know that I saw enough from Ogren to really make a good case one way or the other. Kuznetsov had a slightly larger sample size, and what I'd say about him is if he's got some offensive upside, we didn't see it, at least not at the NHL level. So, and that can be for a couple of different reasons. A player can come in and they can play a system and they can focus solely on what the coach wants them to do while on the ice. And that might be defensively responsible hockey. It might be stay on the right side of the puck, and players can do all of those things. But if he has offensive upside, we didn't see a lot of it. And it might be advantageous for the player to spend some time in Iowa and say, yeah, I'm not playing the NHL, which is where I want to be, but here I can make mistakes. Here I can go east-west when I cross the blue line. I can try to make this pass that I think I can make, but I can't make plays at the NHL that I think I can make. I've got to make the play. And there's a difference. And Kuznetsov, I think, what's his ceiling? Let's call it a second line type of player is probably his ceiling a little bit. And I think what we saw was a third line ceiling type of a player. So I think, it maybe would serve him well to spend some time in the minors. And so with him specifically, do I think that he's probably an NHL caliber player from start to finish? No, I don't. I think it'd serve him and the team well to have him play some time in the American Hockey League. With Liam Ogren, what I did see are some NHL tools, instant NHL tools. The kid could shoot the puck. We were in the San Jose late, Anthony, and in warmups, we were just kind of watching and saying, man, it comes off his stick a little different. It hits the post and it reacts different. And then he came down in that game actually on I think it was maybe his off wing and fires one off the post. Goaltender hadn't moved. And it's like, that's an NHL shot. If the Wild can put the young man in the spot to use that NHL shot, yes, NHL player. And can he win a board battle? He did in that game and ended up putting the puck in the back of the net. Good for him. So he did some little things that look like he's ready for the NHL. So I'd say that in his case, he's probably a little closer than Kuznetsov to being an everyday NHL player.
Yeah, but he definitely is a pro. I watch him on Instagram and some of the workouts that he's already doing with his dad and his brother. They're pretty, and Ricard Raquel, they're pretty unbelievable. Ryan, I've been reporting for some time and have definite reason to believe that in the next month, at a minimum, Marco Rossi is being dangled out there. It's very surprising because it's this is a guy that did everything that they wanted last summer, stuck around, got bigger, got faster, stronger, I should say. Got faster, obviously scored 20 goals. But, one thing that you said at the beginning of our conversation is he a future number 1 or 2 line center, or is he a third line center on a good team? And I bet you that is what's going through the mind of the Wild organization, because maybe they're just not trusting that he's just, when they look at who's coming, the Riley Heights, the Daniil Yurov, and where guys are fitting, they obviously have Eriksson Ek signed for 5 more years, that he has a spot in that top 6. And if that's the case, maybe they look for a Cutter Gauthier type trade where you're trading him to another team that has a top pick that they're not really convinced that's around the same age. What's your thoughts on maybe what the motivation would be if they really are, as I'm hearing, dangling? I had a scout today that asked me why do I keep on hearing Marco Rossi's name out there for my team? So it sure feels like that they are at least motivated to maybe move him by the draft.
Well, I think there's two things, and I'm not privy to the business side and what's going on with the numbers and all the stuff that they have to do to make sure that they can ice the appropriate team under the salary cap. But I think it makes sense that you have a player that's scored 20 goals that might be arbitration ready the following year, and then what's he going to get? When his contract is due, is that $4 million? Is it $5 million? What does that look like? And maybe they think, well, hey, we can double down if we can get a similar type player in terms of production on the ice, just kicking off an entry level deal. We might be able to buy 2-3 years of time, and money to be able to make a run while Kirill is still in their prime, right? Like that might be something that goes through their heads. And I wouldn't be able to speak on that, but I think we do see deals like that occur. But when it comes to the player specifically and what he does provide or what he does not provide, and why he might be dangled coming out of the draft, if you recall, I think the Wild felt that they were getting a real puck mover, a distribution type player where he's going to be able to play the middle and he's going to give it to the scorers on the flank. And I don't think Rossi has turned out to be that. Like we're talking him being a 20-goal scorer. And give him credit, he put weight on in the summer. He went to school and he's able to produce goal scoring. So I think to me, it looks like he watched game tape of Eriksson Ek, and he's turning into a smaller version of Eriksson Ek, where he scores his goals in the paint. But you don't see a lot of distributors of the puck scoring goals in the paint. They play on the perimeter, they find space, they know passing lanes. And Marco Rossi, he might have that skill set, but that's not what they're getting at the moment. He's not like your 60 assist type of guy, 15 to 20 goal scorer. He's not running your power play. And I think that was maybe the upside on his draft day, is that's what he was. And you look at what the Wild need right now. What does Matt Boldy need on that second line or a second scoring option? Is a true puck mover, somebody that can make plays and find him to score the goal, right? And is Rossi that? Maybe, maybe not. He went cool in the summer. Alec Eriksson came out, played it. He played it well. He scored goals right in and around the paint. But that's different than what they thought they were drafting. Still good, still production, just a different skill set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm actually I just think it'd be too early to give up on this player. Just for both of you made the comment about what he did last offseason. And I think when you look at a guy that went from where he did rookie season, 19 games, and wound up back in the American Hockey League, worked himself into a legit NHL player, one of the top scoring rookies in the league. I just think right now it's too early to say that he can't become more of what you're talking about, Ryan. I think we're talking about a guy who has terrific hands, showed the work ethic, has shown the willingness to go to the net. Some of those are the things you can't really teach in a player. And he seems to have those. I think the bigger question is he a viable NHL player if he's a third line center? And to me, that answer is no. I think he has to be Eriksson Ek could be a third line center and be a damn good one and be an unbelievably valuable NHL player. I don't think Marco Rossi brings value if he's not in your top six.
Yeah.
Not as much value.
Yeah. Ryan, fun question from one fan, and then we'll let you go. Who is one guy that you would not want to fight?
I'm sure they'd like me to say Anthony LaPanta, but
I'd like to see that fight.
Yeah, I would not like to see that fight. I surrender right now. I lose.
Yeah. So, I'll go to the era that I played in, and I'd have to say it's probably, well, for sure it would be Derek Boogaard. I don't think I would fight him to begin with. He's way outside of my weight class, but that guy, he put the fear of death into absolutely everybody that played and skated against him. And I didn't want to. I ended up at times having to fight guys outside my weight class, and that certainly stinks. But there's a willingness at times because you think you've got a chance. With that guy, there was no chance. It would have been see you later, good night. I would have taken all embarrassment, him chasing me around the ice, and having everybody in the building know that he was asking me to fight. And I would have politely said no, thank you. And to everybody that gave me a hard time, I would have said, I totally get it.
We've all seen the video of your fight with Foligno. Did anybody ever hit you harder than Foligno hit you more squarely in an NHL fight than he did?
No, nope. No, he got me right on the button. I learned a lot from that one. He's long arms, big hands. He used the wall for a little leverage too. I was like, this guy's cagey. He was big, smart. I think I've told the story before too. His dad was my coach, so his dad was on the bench in Jersey with me, and when I was getting fixed up in between periods, his dad came back almost with a tear in his eye. I was like, why didn't you, so sincere too, why didn't you tell me you're going to fight Marcus? I would have told you how tough he was. I would have told you not to do it right. And I was like, yeah, well, where were you 30 minutes ago? I didn't know I was going to fight him. Jeez, you could have just told me. No,
I happened to, coincidentally, I ran into one of the toughest fighters that I've ever covered in my life today, Peter Worrell, down here at the Panthers practice facility, and he was an absolute maniac on the ice. Him and Paul Laws, when they played together here in Florida. Oh man, were those two tough guys. Those Tampa, Florida games were absolutely bloodbaths. So, well, Ryan, it was good catching up. I'll let you get back to your daughters. They're probably running like amok in your beehives right now.
Well, more like the pantry. I'm sure they've got all the food ripped all over the kitchen. They come home like they haven't eaten for 2 weeks. It's just, it's best to just leave the kitchen, let them do their thing, and deal with the mess later. So that's probably what I'll walk into.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ryan, have a great rest of your off season. I'm sure we'll be running into you soon, and hopefully Anthony doesn't ruin your golf game again.
No, we'll see. We'll be back. We'll defend our title on the course.
Yeah, there's a rematch. It's set. It looks like you're dressed to cover it. You look good. Ties buttoned up and everything too, Mr. Russo.
Yeah. I'm going to the arena beyond early today because I got to get a Reinhardt off day feature done. But so I'm already dressed, even though the game's not for 5 hours. So,
well, good seeing you guys. Have a good couple of weeks till we connect again next, and take care. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. That is Ryan Carter. Again, you could follow him on Twitter at Ryan_Carter22, and Wild on 7th is his podcast that he hosts with John King. And here's a word from some of our sponsors.
There are a lot of options to buy glasses out there. If you've been disappointed by high prices or poor online quality, check out our friends at Huxley Optical. I like Huxley for two reasons. First is the price. Simply put, I don't want to spend $800 on glasses. At Huxley, I know I'll get the same quality for half the price. They're a small independent business that is here to help you find glasses you love and save you money. Second is the service. They have options catered to what I need, and I know someone will be happy to help me find glasses. Whether it's a lens replacement, office glasses, or a brand new pair, they're always ready to help. Check out HuxleyEyewear.com. Again, that's HuxleyEyewear.com today, or go to their locations in Wayzata or Roseville. Tell them Russo sent you for 10% off your prescription purchase.
Hey, everyone. Attorney Jerry Bosch here with Bosch Law Firm and WorkCompExperts.com. For almost 30 years, we've represented Minnesotans just like you all over the great state of Minnesota to guarantee they've been treated fairly and with respect when they've suffered a work-related injury. A work injury can change your life in an instant. You need someone on your side who can help you focus on getting back on your feet and getting paid while you do. You may be entitled to medical benefits, wage loss benefits, job placement, retraining, and payment for permanent disability. To make sure you are being paid all the work comp benefits you're entitled to, please call the attorneys at Bosch Law Firm. The call is always free, and there's never a fee unless we recover benefits on your behalf. Call 651-333-8300, Bosch Law Firm, or visit us at WorkCompExperts.com.
Anthony, tell us about Feller's Ranch.
Well, I'm excited. As we've talked over the last couple of weeks, Feller's Ranch has joined our show as one of our newest sponsors. I'm thrilled about that because of the quality of their steaks is second to none. They're the best steaks I've had. We had Vinny on. He talked about the spinalis cuts that we had tried. We've had their Denver cuts, which are unbelievable. Their ribeyes are terrific. We just had those at Ariana's graduation weekend. But right now, they just have announced that you'll be able to get their brisket at a place down in the southwestern suburbs, Northern Fire Barbecue. It's a cool spot. They've got an unbelievable selection of spices, and I know that the The Fellers guys are really excited to have their Wagyu brisket available there. So if you're interested in brisket, you can check it out there. But as always, if you want their steaks delivered directly to your house, just go to fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They'll get it right to your front door. It couldn't be much easier, and you will not be disappointed in their cuts of steak.
June 24th is our next live show. That'll be at Tuttle's at 7 p.m. Looking forward to getting back out there with Anthony. That'll be a lot of fun. And Anthony, just before we talk, take a couple Twitter questions before we wrap up the show. How about the news out of Carolina of Don Waddell resigning his position with the Carolina Hurricanes, and now is the president of hockey operations, the general manager, and the alternate governor of the Columbus Blue Jackets. My initial two thoughts on that, one from Carolina's perspective is he's free. He has been working without a contract for the last year. If you remember, 6 years ago, he actually was a finalist for the Wild position with Ron Hextall and Bill Guerin. And then at the last minute, actually backed out of that because he got the new deal out of Carolina. And it almost felt like he was using that to get that new deal out of Carolina. This time, when rumblings started to happen that he was going to maybe leave his job after their season ended, this one felt real. That when he was talking to Columbus, after being around Raleigh a lot during the last round of the playoffs, it is just very clear that time was up between him and Tom Dundon. Tom is an intense guy to work for, the owner of the team. He is extremely hands-on. He wants to know everything. He's involved in everything, from deciding who goes on the road to looking at rooming lists to, the radio guys didn't go on the road. And I just think that it just came to a point when he, the deal was done to get Rod Brind'Amour extended, and all of a sudden, Dundon got involved and that thing started to go a little haywire. I think that was just sort of the beginning of the end here. And now my other thought on this is a good move for Columbus. If you look at every general manager that they've had there in their history, Anthony, they've always been guys that never had the job before. This is somebody that has been a general manager in this league for many, many eons, has an incredible relationship with his colleagues around the league. And I think he's going to be able to go there right away and make an impact. I think this is the first time in a long time where I look at Columbus and saying that they are a team that now is going to have somebody there that is at the top, making all the decisions and just, able to really, get this thing going in the proper direction, because Wild fans, as you know, they think that this team has no success. Well, imagine coming in with your expansion cousins and being the Blue Jacket fan for what they've had to deal with for the last 24 years. It's not so bad in Minnesota, Anthony.
No, I wouldn't trade spots for anything with that franchise. And they have grown the fan base. I think it's a fan base that is behind the club, that has supported the club even when they haven't been great. But I think right now, the way their roster is set, they look like they're headed in the right direction for the first time in a few years. It's not just a bunch of guys whose ceiling is probably a role player in the NHL. They've got some good, young, potential star type players and a plethora of draft picks coming. And in recent years, they've had them. I think they had 3 number ones 2 years ago and a couple number ones last year. I think this is a team that is poised to contend. It's going to be tough for them. They're in a incredibly deep division. It isn't going to be easy, but I do think that they're headed in the right direction. Timing was weird, I thought, when all the stuff with Brind'Amour was coming up. It seemed strange to, as soon as that deal got done, all of a sudden the GM's out. But it's good for him, and I think we'll see a Columbus team that'll be contending in sometime in the near future.
I completely agree. And this is the type of thing that I think that if you're going to trade Marco Rossi, that we're going to see Bill Guerin do here in the next 3 weeks is call a new GM like Don Waddell and say, hey, what do you think of your 3 or 4 young kids? And is there one that maybe we could that you would want Rossi for? And then look at other teams. There are a ton of teams in here that have a lot of kids. Anaheim. Can they all play for the Anaheim Ducks? Maybe that's a team that you look at. Utah, as we know, Andre Tierney is his junior coach, and Arizona, when they were in Arizona, had interest in Marco Rossi before. I think that there's going to be options here if Bill Guerin makes this move, and hopefully it's the right one if he does it.
Well, and I think, as we talked earlier, it's just about where a guy fits, and there might be some teams where his fit is just better. I don't know. I think he still has. I think we haven't seen the best of Marco Rossi yet, and I don't know that that's any earth-shattering analysis. I think we've seen a guy who took a big step this year. I think there will be another step taken by Marco Rossi next season. Yeah. And I don't know what the ceiling is for him. I don't know if he could be a first line center on a cup contending team, but I do think we'll see a guy that will turn into a player that could be a viable top 6 center on a really good team.
Remember in his draft year, Anthony, him and Lafreniere were 1-2 in scoring in the Canadian Hockey League. And every time I watch Alexei now, and as dominant a player as he's becoming at this level, especially here in this postseason, I just keep on thinking of Marco Rossi. Like, it just feels again too soon to make this move. And you look back at the last couple of years and all the trade rumors of the Rangers potentially moving Lafreniere, and here he is. I think a lot of Ranger fans are super happy that he hasn't moved yet. The guy that will move at some point is Kaapo Kakko. That guy, he just does not look like he's the player that he was going to become again there. But there's like the type of move that I think, potentially that Bill Guerin, if he's going to make a move like this, I think that he goes. Hey, we got some Twitter questions, and I don't want to run through the 50 that we got, but a couple that sparked my interest, Anthony. I've gotten this a lot lately, is thoughts on Mitch Marner and Martin Necas and all these guys. And again, the problem is salary cap space, Anthony, right? They are going to have to, even though the cap is going up in the next couple of years, they're going to re-sign Faber this year. He's going to get 9. They want to give a guy like Kaprizov in a year is going to get like 11 or something. At some point, like, I don't know if you could go add a lot of add guys with huge AAVs right now until you know what you're going to sign a lot of these players for. And then you have all these kids coming too that you're going to have saved money for as well. So I just don't see how you could add a $10 million Mitch Marner, nor would you want to. I don't know if you would agree. I think you would probably agree with me there, Anthony, that Mitch Marner that you have no interest in somebody like him. But at $10 million, especially, I don't know how they could get it done. And then Martin Necas, the reason why Carolina might move him is because he wants major money that the Wild right now can't afford. So unless the money is going to even up in a trade, I just don't see any way to do it. The person that asked this latest question on Marner said that Eric Tahachik, one of my colleagues, had Ryan Hartman, Philip Gustafson, or 13, and Marcus Foligno going from Mitch Marner. Well, you have 3 guys in that proposed deal that have no move clauses. You think that Hartman, Foligno, and Marner are all going to waive? Just doesn't seem to make sense, right?
Yeah. And when you ask, would you have interest in Mitch Marner? Well, in a vacuum, he's a talented player, but I just don't think with the way this roster is built that he's a fit here. There's no way. There's just no way.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think they could afford him. Here's the one that Tammy asked, and I'm starting to get this more and more, Anthony, is if Jared Spurgeon doesn't have a really good year, do you think the Wild would trade him? I think he said his no move clause is modified this year in the summer. I actually think it would be the opposite. I think the only way to move him would be if he has a good year, Anthony, because he's already 35, right? Coming off major back or season-ending back and hip surgery. If you're talking now a year from now, he's 34. He's turning 35. So a year from now, he's going to be 35. If he's having a bad year, I don't see anybody taking a guy with a $7.575 million cap hit at 35 coming off a bad year, a year removed from hip and back surgeries. I actually think the only way that they would consider trading him or be able to trade him would be if he had a really good year. And then do you want to trade him then? My gut says that the Wild would look to move him if they can next summer.
Potentially. I think there's so many variables. What if he comes back, looks like his old self, everything looks great, and then you might be looking at a defensive core that he's a part of that top 4 again, which is the strength in the core of this club. Everything's open for debate at anything less than that. Let's say he comes back and he's healthy but doesn't quite look the same. Then do you try to find somebody that would be willing to take on his salary? I think the biggest thing right now is let's just hope that the guy is healthy, and all signs pointed to the fact that he was on the right path to be ready at training camp. Let's start there, hope that he's ready. But I just don't think the way Billy looks at this roster, I think there's almost nobody that you would say could just say hard, fast, he will not ever be traded. I just think if the right deal's out there, Billy isn't tied to personalities, or I just think he's willing to listen to just about anything.
Yeah. Last question, Anthony, and this is one I wanted to get to with Ryan, but I'm really curious your thoughts. San Jose, it looks like they're going to hire Marco Sturm or somebody else. Seattle today announced Dan Bylsma coming back from their minor league team and going and taking the job. Scott O'Neill got the Winnipeg job. Dean Evason has been shut out of this cycle despite the fact that there were basically, it felt like a dozen coaching vacancies. One, does it shock you? And two, what do you think Dean's thinking right now? Like, do you think that he would take a job as an assistant somewhere, an associate coach? Or do you think, especially because he's making more than $2 million a year, that he's going to be somebody that is willing to say, you know what, I'll take my money and I'll wait and try to be first out of the gate next year with a Todd McClellan and some of James Woodcroft, some of these other guys that haven't been hired, and hope that if there's a coaching change in season next year, that hello, I'm here.
Yeah, I think that's, and if I were Dean, I think that's how, not knowing a ton about the way that I wouldn't say it's fair for me to say I would advise him to do this, but I would look at it that way if I were him and say, I want to be the first guy when the first guy gets fired in season next year. And then if you don't get hired after this next season, then I think you have to be willing to take an associate coach job, an assistant coach job, and get yourself back into the NHL circles. I am a little bit surprised. I thought he would probably land one of these jobs. I really felt like Seattle or Ottawa were two legit possibilities where it just felt like the direction the team was going, he was a good fit in those two spots, not really knowing personalities or anything with how he jived with ownership or GMs or anything, but just looking at their rosters and the way that they were built. And I don't know how close he was in any of these. I know that it's been reported that he had talked to a couple different spots, and you just never know who sees the game the same way as the guy making the coaching decision. And apparently Dean wasn't a guy that had the same vision as some of these. I am surprised, but I'll be even more surprised if he doesn't ever get a head coaching job again in the NHL.
Yeah, I actually feel really bad for him. I thought like Ottawa to me is perplexing, not bringing him in there for Travis Green. Obviously, again, you kind of like even Jersey, like to just why they felt the need to pounce immediately on Sheldon Keefe. Very curious. I get Toronto. Like Seattle was to me a perfect fit, but obviously it wasn't. And San Jose, I don't think that's like, even though I think San Jose is on the rise and they obviously just drafted Celebrini, they signed Will Smith today, but that's still a long-term thing. And
it's unlikely whoever gets put in a spot like that, the likelihood of them surviving until the rebuilding is over is almost nil. And that would have been a job that, if offered, I would have given serious thought to saying no thanks and waiting for a team that at least had a chance to contend.
Yeah. All right. Really, really fun show. My thanks to Ryan Carter. Our thanks to Ryan Carter for joining the show, Anthony. Hopefully between the Eastern Conference Final and the Stanley Cup Final, I'm going to get back to Minnesota, and you and I can sit down for a podcast and not make Brandon on the other side of this Zoom have to sit through an hour show. I think he loves.
You think Brandon's still awake right now?
No, I'm shocked that he listened, because I did text him at one point when we had a glitch, and he's like, yeah, I know, I already marked it. I'm like, I figured he was out for a walk or on the balcony, and just like, I'll come back in an hour and see if they're still talking type thing. But no, he's there listening to this. So I bet you he really wants me to get back into town so I could do the remote Zoom recorder with you. at the villa that is Anthony LaPanta's home.
We'll do it.
So-
We'll get some Fellers Ranch steaks. It'll be terrific.
Yep, it'll be awesome. June 24th is our next live show at Tuttle's, 7 p.m. Thanks for joining us from our on-location Aquarius Home Services studio. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut Water Treatment Systems, Royal Credit Union, Livia Weight Control Centers, Huxley Optical, Bosch Law Firm, and of course, Fellers Ranch. Talk to you next week, Anthony.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world